1 and 2. Yes. We need to get started. We need to get everybody in place here. So this meeting of the Madera County Board of Supervisors, we ready? You ready? You ready?
I'm ready. We're ready.
This meeting of the Madera County Board of Supervisors now called to order. We're going to begin with a roll call.
Supervisor Wamha. Supervisor Poitras. Supervisor Gonzalez. Brad Colley.
Yeah.
Chairman Rogers.
Here. Okay, let's do the flag salute. Stand together. Flag work. trauma, distractions, delays, deeper disappointment, because if you stop, you're at a dead end, right? Stop. You've got to keep moving forward, not looking back. When you're looking back, your forward progress has stopped. You're not getting toward the goal. Remember, what you did before got you to where you were at. But if you're continually looking back, your progress has stopped. Don't rely on the past. Don't keep relying on the past. Now, that doesn't mean we don't look back, because we learn from our mistakes, we learn from history, right? But we don't dwell on it. If you're always looking back, your progress is stopped. You're not going to be moving forward, even though we learn from the past. Expect the unexpected. Repeat that with me. Expect the unexpected. We all know that. If you're not prepared for the unexpected, it's doggone sure well. That's what's going to happen. As I climbed Lambert Dome with my 16-year-old son, we were about halfway up the 1,500-foot summit, when dark clouds started coming over the backside of the mountain and obscuring the sun. And we climbed on in near dark and got off route onto a much more difficult route of the climb than what we had planned. We got to a certain point and I realized we were in trouble. And I was disappointed. Let's say that. Disappointed. And I was at a dead end, and I was at a one. And I said to my son, son, I love you. And we hugged. Because what I was about to do could cost me my life. It was dark. And I climbed the last pitch. Free climb, speed climb, with no protection. I got to the top and I roped up my son. And how we got off of that mountain with the Rangers, Yosemite Rangers down below, and my wife and two other boys frantic. That's another story. I definitely didn't expect that dilemma. Don't allow fear to paralyze your upward movement. That's a dead end, right? Fear will throw you into a dead end. Instead of dwelling on how far down, he's looking back. I'm looking back and I get a little scared. Instead of dwelling on how far down, why not think about how far to the goal, how far to the peak, and keep climbing. Remember, where you're looking is where you are going. Let's repeat that. Where you are looking is where you are going. That's an important concept. Your eyes on the prize. Where you're looking, where you're going. Sometimes, as I said earlier, you have to adjust routes. Your route. You have to be flexible. It's not about the plan, it's about the goal. Right? Don't get stuck on the plan, even though you create plans for a reason to move through to the objective, but it's not about the plan, it's about the goal. Don't get stuck on an objective that's not moving to the goal. You know, the danger in climbing is not always about the big fall. Most injurious, some of our SAR guys will tell you this, most injurious falls and fatal falls are under 15 feet. And a lot of times it's just because they don't want one and they don't want it. That's why I got those helmets out there to show you. There's a lot of gear that we wear when we climb. But it's the little details, it's the little things. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Keep walking at the details, keep watching the details, because that's what's important. Now, lifting one another as a team. Communication is critical. Communication is critical. Point to point. Why do you guys see this video a little bit? You know, my wife thinks I have a really, really something. And she's right. Communication is critical. Anyway. Doesn't want to communicate. Okay.
Trustee Manisek. Trustee Manisek. Hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät, das Überlebensradar. Hello, can you hear it? Can you? We are syncing. We are sync.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?
I love that. Climb on, that's me, we can see, demonstrate that for you. There's other phrases, falling. Oh, that's an important, falling. Falling. I was on Nutcracker in Yosemite. And my partner was way up above on this rock, and he's got me on the way. And I fell and I yelled out falling, but he could not hear me because of the wind. But he had me. I only fell about 15 feet. And so communication is so critical. It's the details of communication. Rock is another one. Rock! Because rock got a guy down below and rock falling and kind of protect himself. You don't want to be looking up and have that in your face. So when you hear rock, you instantly react. Nothing will change or solve a problem if you don't communicate about it, right? We're on State Declare Dome, which is a climate long meadow. I'm up about 400 foot off the deck, and I'm leading the climb. And I'm on what they call a smear. There are no cracks, no holes, no handholds, nothing. I'm on a smear. You're literally like Spider-Man clinging to the rock with gravity and friction. That's it. The gooey on the bottom of your shoes is all that's holding you on the rock. So I'm on this. That I had jammed in the rock, the cams that I put in, I mean, this is all nuts. They had pulled out and my rope pulled through these devices here. The legs start going because you've got pressure on these legs. And you're thinking, I'm not going to be able to get up. Fortunately, about 50 feet away, there was a French climber who saw me in trouble, pendulum over, tied me in, I was able to finish the climb. When I fell off that hill, my feet landed inches from a monument to someone who died on that very hill. That was pretty poignant day. Now, what was the point of this communication? No one yelled out, your pro fell out. I embraced the negativity of that comment. And fear gripped me as a result. When you embrace the negativity of comment, fear will grip you. Or anger can grip you. where other things can grip you. And those are going to be obstacles to you climbing on, aren't they? But instead, I should have embraced the critique. I should have just said, hey, my toe fell out. I just need to move up to where I can get some throw in. And if I'd have thought about it and let my mind grip the critique instead of the negativity, I would have done much better. So what I want you to repeat after me is ignore the negative, embrace the critique. Ignore the negative, embrace the critique. Are you listening? Are you paying attention? Is there internal dialogue? How about monologue? Someone's talking to you and they're not picking up on your middle cue that I'm done with this conversation. You're not picking up on that. It's a monologue. Active listening, feedback, nonverbal communication, verbal communication, written communication, all super important. What I would like to say to you this morning is make a big effort in your life in communication. Not only at home, but at work. It's saving a lot of problems down the line. Build bridges, not walls. Let's say that together. Build bridges, not walls. Fly with your team, your partner, rely on others. Don't try to do it all yourself. Don't try to do it all yourself. Doing too much yourself will burn you out. And when you get burned out, you get weak. And weakness is a recipe for disaster. Famous climber Dan Osmond died on a frayed line. He holds the world record for a static free fall. And he went one last time on that line, which he had left for 1 week. Left that static line in place for 1 week. The sun had beat down on it, the weather had beat down on it. This was in USA. And in front of his 13-year-old daughter, he decided he was going to do one last free fall on that static line. And it broke because it sprayed and he died. Check for praise in the line. Building a team is building on trust and partnerships. En belay means I've got you. Can you rely on the people that are in your team? Can I rely on you? And can you rely on me? It's a two-way street, isn't it? Know yourself first. You can't help others in your team if you don't even know yourself. Know yourself first. Test yourself, stretch yourself. You can do more than you think you can, and what you think you will do. You can do more than you think you can, and what you think you will do. So work with yourself first, then challenge others in your team. Know and utilize your differences as team members. Use their strengths and help them bolster their weaknesses. I want to say this to you. Don't be afraid to talk about your own weaknesses. See that? And that's part of trust, isn't it, in a team. It's hard to tell somebody in a team that you don't trust about what your weaknesses are so that they can bolster you and help you. But a good manager, a good leader, always put people around them that will bolster their weaknesses. And they're always making others aware of what they are. They're not afraid to admit it. Let me tell you something about ego. It is a prey. Ego is a prey that you can't afford to have in the rope while you're climbing. And by the way, a rope is made up of many strands. This rope we have right here, it's not just one piece. It is hundreds and thousands of pieces woven together to make it strong. You could say that this rope is a team of strands, and it is strong. I defy anybody here to break that. I've fallen on this rope. Thankfully, it didn't break. It wasn't frayed. You put one fray in it, and you put it under pressure and climb by falling on it, it could cost you your life. Frays are the details that we can't afford because we need to do mistakes. Cut out the phrase. We're stronger together than we are separately. Let's say that together. We are stronger together than we are separately. The last point, another mountain. So you've reached this pitch. Here's another. And another. And always another mountain. Sometimes you find it. Sometimes it finds you. You never arrive. Because if you arrive, you stop climbing, right? You never arrive. Life is an adventure to be lived. So keep learning. Keep living. Seize the day and climb on. Climbing.
Climb on.
Let's do it again. Climbing.
Climb on.
All right. What's the next thing on our agenda?
Go back to the regular board meeting and pull the wall here.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for your good attention. And I hope this, I know I'm not trying to teach you anything, but I hope it inspires you. Thank you. I didn't know. That was six. All right. Next week. Yes. Well, and it's just started. Okay, yeah.
What? No, it's part of the meeting, the official meeting, official capacity. Yes, exactly. Not just casual. Yeah, casual doesn't count. Did you get the regular coffee? No, it's.
You have an hour in closed session.
I'm not real picky when it comes to, as long as it's got as long as it's captivated.
Just let it, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're talking about my coffee.
Drink on,
Drink on.
Okay, we're going to go to closed session, but before we do, I'm going to go ahead and move to the consent calendar and public comment. So the first thing I'd like to ask, are there any public here to address the board? Anyone from the public at all that would like to address the board?
Nobody from the public, nobody online.
Thank you. So we'll move to consent calendar. And we have, do we have any items to be removed for consideration or any questions? If not, public comment on the consent calendar. Any public to comment on the consent calendar?
No comments.
I'll move to approve.
Motion is made to approve and second. Roll call.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras.
Yes.
Supervisor Wamha.
Yes.
Supervisor McCully.
Yes.
Chairman Rogers.
Yes.
Vote passes 5-0.
At this time, we will move to closed session.
Heads and their number twos that are in attendance. We did have 3 or 4 folks that had to drop out due to illness. It's going around. So if you are looking for certain people and you think, why aren't they here? They may have already notified us that they couldn't be here or shouldn't be here, or we had one whose significant others having some surgery, so they didn't want to be around people and get sick and then not be able to take care of them after their surgery next week. So you do have quite good attendance this year. And so the Clifton Strengths program has been done by a number of us. You've all got the book. You don't need to see my book. My book's older, but the whole idea behind it, just like all of these other personality tests, is to learn about how each other think and interact better based on knowing what somebody's strengths are. So I didn't anticipate the board doing that today. However, we are making arrangements for Dr. Rodriguez to come back in January to follow up on what she's doing over there. And if you find value in taking this test, I will tell you that we did it. We didn't do it sheriff's office wide, but we did a large number of the command staff while I was still there. And we literally in a command meeting did 2 or 3 where we just read the strengths and everyone guessed who it was. So I haven't run into anyone yet that has taken it and said, that's absolutely not me. That's garbage. Throw this thing away. So what I've found with it is it's highly accurate. You know, it's encouraging to know what your positives are. But if you look into the back of the book, it also tells you what the negatives are for the trait that you rank highly in. And I will definitely say that the negatives from the traits that I rank highly in are 100% accurate. So I figured that the board would probably want to do something. If you're interested in doing this in January, you'd want to do it together as a board, not necessarily the greater group with the department heads. I thought this would give you some time, number one, to make sure that you've taken the test, and number two, a chance to peruse through the book. The front end of the book's only about 30 pages. The back end is all descriptive information about the strengths. And if you're interested in doing that, probably what I will do is I'll put together a matrix of your strengths once we have them all, share them with each other. That way you kind of look at the book and go, okay, here's the pluses and the minuses from those particular strengths. And then we could have our facilitated discussions if the board so desires, or if the board just wants to have a discussion internally, we can lead that also. I know that Maddie Mendez has been using this probably for the last, time flies, probably for the last 5 years at CAPMC, and it has found it probably is longer than that, isn't it? Probably goes back to about 2016. So then that's where I met Dr. Rodriguez was there. I'd already taken the test, but since Maddie was doing this with the group, it was good to, I wanted to go to the group just to verify, is this thing accurate? And again, even in that group, everybody was highly surprised. So when you take the test, don't do this. Don't think a long time about the questions. Even if you don't like the answers that are choices, pick the best one that fits you. Because what will happen is it'll move on. And you'll go, what just happened here? So I think I ended up, I don't know how many questions there are. I missed one because I overthought it and it flipped. It keeps going.
If you're like in between, if either answer didn't stand out, you hit neutral, right?
Yeah, try to hit as few neutrals as possible. Try to pick one. I don't think I don't think you'll be disappointed in the results if you, I mean, because we all get these things. Would you rather do this or do that? I don't want to do either one, but think about it. Okay, I guess that I really would rather do this than that. So I'm picking the one on the left and on it goes.
Okay.
So it's not absolute either.
Yeah, I hit a lot of in between stuff. I was like,
There are about 5 selections. Left, right, in between, neutral.
yeah.
So she'll be with them probably actually through lunchtime presenting. And then they're going to do pretty much what we're going to do later, which is they're going to look at the goals and strategies and objectives. I haven't given them the handouts that you have. They do have the current strategic plan, and they're going to go through that. And then I've also given them the legislative platform so that they can go through and have a discussion amongst themselves about that. And then tomorrow morning, in the first part of tomorrow morning, we will all get back together as the large group. We'll pull the wall and talk about the goals first. You know, what did they come up with? What did we come up with? Then we're going to talk about the employee survey. I thought it'd be better to talk about it as a group as opposed to doing it over here and over there. Melissa has a PowerPoint presentation put together, and that the committee to review that was Roman, Melissa, and Yvette. And then after that, we'll have a quick chat about legislative platform. Will probably be the easiest because their priorities are probably our priorities and vice versa. And then we'll take a break, or depending on if he's here already, we'll roll right into Paul Yoder. So then Paul will be the last item tomorrow. There's no lunch tomorrow, so you're on your own for lunch. I will be leaving before Paul gets done to go down to the golf course to say thank you to the people who played golf related to the SJV RACC item, and maybe to pick a couple things up that will be ready for that event tomorrow. So if I'm not here when Yoder's here, it's not because I don't want to hear him. It's because, you know, I need to do other things. So that's basically what's going on for this day and a half. So one of the things that I wanted to remind you is, and this kind of fits in with how we've done workshops previously. So some of you were on the board, some of you weren't, some of you were chiefs of staff when we've done these before. And I feel like we've seen 2 or 3 different models of presentation related to goal setting or board priority setting. And I feel like not last year's, but the 2 years before that, I felt like we talked about a lot. We wrote a bunch of stuff down, but the presenter never really synthesized it for your use afterwards. So I'm not going to review that today. I think that's water that's gone into the bridge already. I have no intent for us to be here all the way to 4. I don't think that that's productive. But my goal today is to just review the information that's in front of you, not in depth, but more for the style of how those entities are doing it. And then get feedback from the board on what ultimate style do you want, and how do you want to pull the old strategic plan into what you want to do into the future. So when we've talked about this before, we've talked about the premise kind of was we're going to build something around the best county to live, work, and play in. So is there a consensus of the board that that's the backdrop that we want to base our goals or our board priorities on, or does the board wish to go somewhere else? Now would be a great time to discuss that. I know that really started, I think it was Tyson and Tom Wheeler who coined that phrase first. Unfortunately, we should have copyrighted it because now you see it everywhere. It's kind of like some of the terms on the psychology side of things, thriving. Some people were using the word thrive like 12 years ago, and then bigger, badder places adopted it and took it away from the other people. So I don't know if the live, work, and play still resonates with people or what, as far as because remember, with goals or things like not a slogan, but more of a vision, you want it to keep it as simple as possible so you can build almost anything underneath it. You want to keep it as simple as possible, frankly, so that your employees, You've all heard the, hey, if you walk through Kennedy Space Center in 1969, you ask anybody there, no matter what their job, what are you doing? They'd say, oh, we're putting a rocket on the moon. So we want the employees, the ones that are interested, because not all will be, to ultimately be able to say, we're making this the best county to live, work, and play in. Done, right? And then theoretically, any of their ideas that they have to even, let's just say it's something to improve their own work efficiency or work conditions, should be able to be pitched up through the chain of command underneath those goals. They should be able to explain to you, oh, well, hey, that's, like when we bought the green machine to do the sides of the flood control. That'd be an easy one to, well, we're making this a safer place to live, work, and play because we bought this expensive piece of equipment to kill all the, well, not kill, cut all the vegetation and all the canals down in the valley. There just isn't any canals up here to cut. So it's that, I guess I'd like to build or have the board, if that's the pleasure, build that kind of thinking into the people who work here. And we want them to know, I mean, other than just to get a paycheck, take care of the families and all those kind of basic ways to describe it. We want to be able to have a way to describe it that's simple. So with that, any thoughts or suggestions on live work?
I like the way you're framing it. And I think it's really important that it's meaningful, like you said, that fits along with my philosophy about goal setting. And I think a lot of times the type of words we use in those mission statements, like you said, counties just, they'll throw out words thriving, blah, blah, blah. And it really becomes meaningless. It becomes rhetoric rather than purposeful.
Okay.
And so I think you're spot on your synopsis for me.
I don't know if do I need this or it doesn't matter. Oh, it's for the internet. Okay, here's one. This is on,
It's-
okay.
yeah.
Tell if mine was
The,
on.
He has all the controls over there.
It's got the control.
Oh, I'm in control.
Excellent. So, yeah, live, work, and play. That's a great slogan. And I think it really depends on who we're talking to. If we're talking to, let's say, people from outside of Madera County, and we're looking to advertise Madera County, and we're, hoping that they'll move to Madera County, I think that live, work, and play sounds very attractive. If we're talking to our employees, I'm wondering if live, work, and serve might be a better type of an approach, because if it's something that our employees are looking at in everything that they do and how they approach things, what we do is we're like a business. We're as electeds, we're not to be served, we're to serve. As a county, we're like a business, we're to serve. And I'm wondering if that might be more effective in terms of something that everybody thinks about. Like if you're on the in public health, am I serving correctly? By doing this, am I serving? Am I public works, the same type of thing? If I'm at the counter taking an order, working with somebody, am I serving to the best of my ability? I'm not playing to the best of my ability, but am I serving? But again, I think that they're looking at two different audiences.
Sure. And we recognize that. One other, I'll call it kind of a ground rule thing that I'll throw out there is, so my hope is to get a lot of input from you all today so that we can synthesize something and bring it back to you more formally. So if I don't push everything to an ultimate conclusion, that's an interest, for example, in this one, that's an interesting point. Do we have this for the greater public and this for our employees? Or do we determine a way to put this underneath one of these categories? So if work, and we want to talk about community development, county government, and then under county government, is it live, work, and serve? So those are the.
Interestingly enough, piggyback what you just said, if you've been to the employee orientation when I deliver it, Karen knows this, that the first thing I tell them is, you just embarked on a career serving the public. and we are public servants. And I hope you enjoy serving because that's what you're aiming at. And so, that waits that.
What is the target audience for this slogan?
So
Is this just like a county slogan or what is this?
Our mission is to live work.
right, so currently you have a mission. It's on top of page 4, create a countywide culture of excellence through dedicated public service. So that shows that census is obviously that's aimed at your employees. But ultimately, I think you need to have something that's aimed at the public also. So,
Our mission statement says creating a countywide culture of excellence through dedicated public service.
right,
So there's the public service part.
currently, right.
And I like that. I don't know that can be improved on. I don't know. It could maybe.
And I agree with Rob. I mean, it's from like an economic development standpoint, I think live, work, play is a great slogan to bring new people in or get people potentially interested in coming to Madera, bring their business to Madera, buying a house in Madera. So it really just depends on who our audience is for this slogan.
So in some ways, the employees are your audience on that one too. Especially your newer employees, we want to get them to come to Madera County they already work here. So why don't you live here and play here also? Ultimately, though, just in terms of background slogans, you're right. This one is going to be public. And these principles here are probably already wrapped up in your existing mission statement. So this is the time if you think you want to change that or you want to leave it alone. This is kind of the consensus building time that we wanted to discuss that.
I would say if the idea is to keep it public, I would like to stay with the original live, work, play. I think it was a good message.
Okay, say that again.
If the idea is that
keep
is
it-
going to be the public message, I think we should probably just stick with the live, work, play. I think it is a good message.
It's a positive message.
You could cascade that.
Right. Right. So before we get too much farther down this one, let me just explain to you why I even gave you all these handouts. Each one is slightly different than the other. So if you pick off the County of Los Angeles strategic plan, didn't print as pretty as it looks like. You go to page 2. So according to LA County, they run the entire county on only 3 goals. They have make investments that transform lives, foster vibrant and resilient communities, realize tomorrow's government today. I'm not, that's a little, I don't know. It doesn't thrill me. The other, and then underneath that, they've got 10 strategies, which is page 3. However, a lot of their sub bulletins, as you get deeper in here, have more to do with people and less to do with infrastructure. So I get a little lost. I realize LA has a whole lot more need for investing in people in the community because they have millions more people than we have, literally. So it makes sense that their goals would be fostered in that direction. But the reason I brought it is because you've got the most populous county in the entire state of California, and they only have 3 goals. They build everything else underneath it. So I would expect that if you worked in LA, you ought to be able to put anything you're doing underneath these 3. So again, if you had a suggestion or a program or we're asking for an additional body, it's because it's a budget time or whatever. It's not going to start right underneath these goals, but ultimately, whichever strategy you're trying to support is going to end up under one of those 3 goals. It's not just, I need another body. Because I think we do need to start thinking a little more about if we need another body and we have the funding, why do we need it and what is it going to do? So the next one let's look at is, it's just a single sheet. It's Stanislaus County. It again is fairly simple, but you'll notice they didn't do goals. They only did board priorities, which the benefit of doing board priorities is you can make them fairly general, just like a goal, but probably a little more specific than an overarching goal. But then they did something that I wouldn't recommend that you do unless it particularly suits the board's pleasure, is if you turn it over to the organizational chart, they actually placed those priorities above certain departments. And I guess I'm thinking after 40 years of public service, I can see employees going, oh, I don't have to do any of these priorities because I'm in this branch over here. Forget that. And then another thing, and I realize our own strategic plan reflects this. We have Supervisor McCauley as Chief of Staff McCauley in there, and we don't have an up-to-date photo, but that's just because that's when it was adopted. So we will clean those things up. But if you compare what's listed as a priority and then what's listed as a priority on the org chart, they're not the same. So this one says supporting strong and safe neighborhoods, and this one says supporting a strong and safe community. So if we're going to do priorities, we need to make sure that we're consistent everywhere. If it's worded this way, it's worded that way everywhere. So I just included that one. As Stanislaus is a pretty well-to-do county for our region. They seem to do well. I wouldn't recommend doing this. However, if Stanislaus County can run on board priorities and not goals and board priorities, then that's something for you to consider. The next one is Sutter County. It's a 2-page white one. They did goals. I would say that they have too many goals. They have 9 goals. I think that their goals are more like what I would call priorities. So you end up with everybody get this one? You get this one?
Other counties. That's the way.
You can share.
I have more.
Thank you. Very much.
Oh, you got it? I just think that their goals are more like what you would give us as board priorities. And then they've called their priorities the 6 things on the second page. And the last thing that I gave you was a copy of the Madera Vision 2025 plan. So the good thing about this is it's very detailed, and the bad thing about this is it's very detailed. So I think this was designed to be more of a long-term plan. This particular report, I think, was posted in December of 2009. So you see that they did this well in advance, and this may be something that you wish to consider doing for the county outside of your day-to-day vision and board priorities and goals. So. And I get. Man. No, I've got everybody.
Jay, I just want to let you know that we had a brilliant city council when that was put together. But
Anybody?
I think there are like
Who's the mayor on that?
when it was implemented, it was yours truly, but the City Madera, one thing I think there are like three or four areas, general areas, and then there's a whole bunch of work products underneath each of those areas. So it was task and things of that sort. So quite a few of them were accomplished in the first couple of years, the low hanging fruit. And then some of the others, well, who knows what has happened the last couple of years, but I think it's been largely forgotten, but that's what the idea was. It was it's kind of a community thing that came together. It wasn't necessarily a put together by the city.
Okay, it wasn't necessarily put together to guide the council and
Right. It was,
totally.
yeah, it's a 20-year plan to guide the council, long term. To me, this is what a, long-term plan is all about. You've got the goal way out there, but it was, put together with, lots and lots and lots of community input and meetings and stakeholders and so forth. So, but with lots of very specific type of tasks that needed to be accomplished.
I think you alluded to something that's important to understand, and that's that there are different timeframes of goal setting. And you have long, far outreaching goals, 20-year plan or whatever. And then of course you break it up incrementally into 10-year and 1 year from year to year. And so when you're delineating those, that's kind of what we have to consider is the time frame. What are we talking about? Our overall arching goals for the long term or our immediate goals?
Sure. So your current Vision 2023 plan, I think was put together in 2015.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we looked at it again in 2020. And now it's obviously 2023. So it's time to make a decision. What kind of format do you want us to be in going forward? B, what do you want in your plan? So let me grab my copy of that.
I kind of like what Rob is saying about, really hammering out some goals, which is obviously a longer overarching process. Similarly, I also appreciate the comments around servant service. I think that is a value that the county holds, and I think it's something we try to translate into, service as far as when somebody comes through our doors, providing that higher level of service, making sure that they have all the assistance they need. So I appreciate that. And I think going back to our mission statement might be something where we think about if we want to continue on with best place to live, work, and play, perhaps we, incorporate that into our actual mission statement rather than creating a countywide culture of excellence through dedicated public service, which kind of seems like maybe a vision or a value. But I really appreciate the live, work, and play motto. I think it's worthy of incorporating into our mission.
Anybody else?
So is the live, work, and play, it's just, I'm thinking out loud here. Live, work, and play is kind of like a motto. The best place to live, work, and play. And then the mission statement we've delineated here in the past was creating a countywide a culture of excellence through dedicated public service. And dovetailing those a little bit. I don't know how to
So
parse that.
in your current plan on page 2, or
Right.
sorry, page 4. If you look at all these are really geared more towards the employees.
Right.
Live, work, and serve, even your core values, professionalism, loyalty, accountability, compassion, excellence,
Right.
employees. Creating countywide culture of excellence through dedicated public service employees. And then the strategic categories basically come down to the areas that the employees run on behalf of the board. So
So would we call that a motto then over here, the live, Madera County is a great place to live, work and play. Is that the
Well,
model?
again, it depends on, do you want to make this for the everything we do, or do you want to make this for the employees? Because if it's for everything we do, it'd be your mission, making Madera County the best place to
Yeah,
live, work,
I
and play.
agree. I agree. I think it needs to. Because the public's gonna see it, they're gonna absorb it. I think it comes a little mundane to just say, you know, we want to create a county of culture of excellence through dedicated public service. And that's a great statement. But it doesn't say anything about the county, you know, as a whole. So the live, work and play needs to be in there somewhere.
Yep.
I think the discussion was to revisit this and come up with something new and innovative, correct? The whole purpose for this today
Yeah, the
is to,
purpose of this is to
Yeah.
come
Try to
with,
incorporate
Right.
both maybe, or just one idea.
well, ultimately, if you do live, work, and play as your ultimate goal, then the majority of this is going to end up underneath whatever bullet point you are describing how the county works to accomplish this.
And that's where you can insert that
You
statement.
would
of excellence.
insert almost all of this, and then we
I
would
like
have,
that.
we would need to review what we have in some of the focus areas because it's dated and we need to update it.
I guess what I'm saying is I find those statements very palatable. I think they're great statements. But positioning them, I wasn't certain where we wanted to put them.
So then that kind of leaves you with nothing under live and nothing under play. So,
Right.
so what, I guess what I would suggest to you, again, remember, it's your ultimate decision, that this would end up under a board priority underneath working. And maybe the board priority becomes creating it wouldn't work exactly this way, but creating a countywide culture of excellence through dedicated public service to people who live and work and play in Madera County. And then we would add all this underneath it. And then how are you going to do that? Well, you do things how through strategies, and that's the rest of this particular plan. So I wouldn't envision that being your only board priority underneath that, because you'd have to have some for economic development. But if you're comfortable with this being the lead, we can help you build the rest of this. But if you have things today that you'd like to say, I believe this is a priority for the board, then we can help you determine which one of these three it falls under. And then we can build you some strategies underneath that of how we're going to try to deliver the board's priority under living, affordable housing. How are we doing that? So it would be boilerplate stuff that you already know about, the housing element and all that. But other things would be, what are we going to try to do innovatively to build better places for people to live that they can actually afford to move into? So
you're, if I can give you some feedback and you can tell me if I'm on the right track with what you're suggesting. If we use the live, work, and play as a thesis, then we're gonna dive into each of those points, live, work, play as the bullet points for the what our goals would be in those.
So if it's the consensus of the board of these three,
Right.
then I would suggest to you that you probably have in your heads three things that we can turn into board priorities under all of
I like
these. You already have one under work. It's
Right.
this.
Right.
So are the other ones what?
Right.
Working together with other government entities,
Affordable
all of the
housing,
infrastructure stuff.
great jobs.
All of the economic development stuff. And that's not something that we'll get through totally today, the nuts and bolts of it. What I'd like to do though is hear from all of you what your priorities are, so that even if we can't word that today as a priority, we can create a draft that we can give back to you and you can say, yes, that's that reflects what I meant, or no, that's way off base. That's not what I meant. So.
Well, I'll throw something out under live and that would be well-planned communities, which we have, striven to do that in the past. But I think that still remains a high priority. And I think the fact that we have two communities that have made national gold honors really speaks well for the county in that regard. I think it says that it was a priority, and I think it's still a priority. Whether it's a upper income development or a lower income development, I don't care which one it is. And you want it to be affordable as well. You want to have some affordable housing as well, but you also want it to be well planned. And considering all the elements, and that's just one aspect.
Okay, what else does the board, would you like to see as a board priority under living?
We've got a community health assessment. I think public health is working on putting together a couple directives in response to that assessment. So community health, implementation of recommendations from the assessment.
Okay. Any others?
You're the master of.
I guess I would suggest to you that roads and water and sewer infrastructure,
Yeah.
roads could probably go under play also, but people don't want to live here if the roads stink and if the water and sewer doesn't work right? So.
Roads, water, public safety, under live.
Wait, that's a mouthful. That's very good.
I think access to services. I feel like now that they're quiet, we should make a bunch of noise over here. Thank you.
Jordan's comment on public safety, safe communities, just a must. That is absolutely a must. Public safety. And that's our number one priority. The board. For 11 years.
So, if you look into our little strategic focus areas and results, and if we're looking to put them under one of these categories, I mean, live is practically everything. But one of the main things that we deal with in the state, in fact, it's the number one issue, according to probably right up there with crime and public safety. For years, it's been homelessness, and that's focus area number 8 under health. And so it's talking about those things, as well as the overall health, physical health of our communities as well. We have, I think Americans, and this is a statistic that's hard to believe, that obesity is like 40% of all Americans. I think that's, to me, that's a little bit on the high side, but certainly that's an issue we deal with here in the Valley. And the more unhealthy our people are, the more our public health system is going to be stressed. Our federally qualified health centers, as well as our hospitals. And that's one of the things that we noted during COVID, was that those areas that where you had a healthier population, you had less percentage of the population experiencing devastating effects from COVID, whereas your lower income communities and unhealthy communities, they had a higher percentage of the population and were devastated by COVID. So that's hand in hand. So, I think that's for a living. I mean, you have to, that has to be one of those issues,
So I love that. And I want to dovetail in with that on the thought of, because I'm thinking beyond, I can't see over here.
Another microphone.
Oh, okay. What I'm thinking is of holistic, the holistic health of the community. There's so many aspects of that we could include. Housing is one of them. And that's part of it. And then, of course, I think the mental health aspects of people. But I was reading that in American homes, 30% of the homes now are fatherless. There's an aspect that really bothers me. And what are initiatives? What can we strengthen to aid that? How can we address that? And then, so there's so many aspects of health that we could look at and then holistically.
So just real quick, while you all were sharing, I tried to put down on here where these would already fit on what you previously picked as strategies. Housing doesn't really show up under infrastructure. My guess would be that's where it'd go. So for right now, I just gave it a question mark. It's probably in the detail. Implementation of the CHA would be a help thing. All of this stuff is infrastructure, all of the water, sewer, pavement management index and roads. Access to services would be more along the lines of community. We want to be accessible to the community and provide them what they need. Public safety, unfortunately, is named public safety on here, so I wasn't stuttering. And then homelessness would come under number 8, health. So maybe just for a moment, we move on to, I'm sure we're going to be really good at being able to fill in the work one, but what about the place side? I'm sorry.
So under the current strategic plan, the focal area for homelessness is actually under community, but it could be certainly in both places.
And I would like to kind of challenge the premise of some of these things instead of, the government being the solution to all these things. And it kind of goes back to the mission statement where I wrote this down, but to foster an environment that allows Madera County to be the best place to live, work, and play. So it's not necessarily us providing all of these things, but making sure that the county as a government is supporting an environment that fosters those things.
And I would switch that in the strategic planning world. Usually, like the mission says, you live, work, and play by, and then put yours in.
Yeah.
Tomato. Thank you.
Ready? Okay. I just want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, I think that's a comment worth noting because a lot of times we could develop a plan and throw money at something that we'll never solve. Right? But we can foster the environment. We can encourage. We work with NGOs, multiple NGOs in Madera County that have access to things we don't have and jobs that we don't have.
I look at affordable housing. I mean, does affordable housing always mean providing subsidies to build housing for the less fortunate? No, a lot of the time it's creating an environment that allows multiple people to come in and do things at a cheaper expense to actually increase the housing supply, which thus will decrease the actual cost of the housing.
Yeah,
It's-
for
but-
example, lowering the fee for housing development that's where the price is going to be under a certain amount or something like that, lowering impact fees or something like that. That's just an example, but you're right.
Well, and if we're going to provide the the environment or the arena or whatever we want to call it for these things to happen. A lot of it's built through relationships of the board with the people who really can do that and keeping it squared away the way it's supposed to be, so that someone isn't coming in and asking for something inappropriate, but so that the bottom line is we hear fairly often that people enjoy trying to develop in Madera County because it's not a big headache, like
Right.
perhaps at least with two of our neighbors, a near one and one across the river. But we somehow within how we make things live, work, and play properly, we have to keep that going. But I guess that goes back to the community and to the current mission statement, fostering an environment for these things to happen. So Supervisor McCauley, did you have something? Okay, Rob.
Jay, yeah, Supervisor Wamhoff and some of his comments, just kind of helped me focus in on some of the things that, as far as the things that we should be focused on, or the things that we actually are funded to do.
Right.
There's
Right.
certain things, we're not all things, all people, and it's better, less government, but in a case of public health, that's a situation where we can help to intervene in the health of others, behavioral health, social services, our homeless coalition. We're actually making some headway in some of our projects there. So so where we are funded and we are tasked to do certain things to do, proceed with excellence or to do the best job possible, and to recognize that, but to also recognize that, we can't, there's certain things that we just can't do. It's personal responsibility and things of that sort. And we have to recognize we stay in our lane, we do the best we can, but with what we've got.
All right, do we want to talk about play a little bit?
Sure.
We have,
We were talking earlier about the bike trails, the equestrian trails. I'd love to see those things come to fruition. It'd be a real focus for the Yosemite Visitor Bureau and even the state of California, as far as get on the radar for promoting those kind of things. And I haven't really given up on the idea of a ATV park yet. I'm still mulling that. And where that might happen. And, we tried to put that together some years ago and it fell apart due to location, I think, mainly. But that's something we could still consider.
I think generally speaking, kind of like Supervisor alluded to just a moment ago, when it comes to these kind of projects, and specifically when you reference the all multi-use trails that, the communities trying to develop up here in the mountain communities connecting Bass Lake to Norfolk to Oakhurst to Corseville to Ahwahnee, up to Mariposa, down to Fresno. Great project, but the county's role in this has been fostering an environment in which we can make that happen. It's not the county leading the charge to say, we're going to put up, hundreds of thousands of dollars to, make this happen. It's similar to some of our efforts with public safety and fire risk reduction, where the county has taken an alternative approach where we're partnering with NGOs, partnering with, special districts in order to make this, these things happen. So I'm not sure how we incorporate that into our mission, vision, values. But I think Supervisor's onto something there in this idea of fostering an environment. I really appreciate those words and that premise.
Yeah, from a policy standpoint, we need to be project friendly to these type of projects and facilitate. I know sometimes there's like environmental impacts and things like that. So facilitate make it easy as possible within the constructs of the law to make these projects come together.
Oh, I think there's two sides to these projects. One is the actual recreation side. Does it have value? Is it properly situated? So when I saw this presentation last year, I couldn't, and maybe there is one, I just don't know about it. And I'm not currently in shape to mountain bike anyway, so maybe my brain was going, don't do it. But you could say to do something similar to what they're doing in the northern counties where they're much less populated and also much poorer. So maybe you drive to North Fork, drop your bike by roads, go through Manzanita, up at the Manzanita area, and then up and over the dam, and maybe down 222. I know there's a lot of bike traffic on 222 already, but you want to balance safe recreational fun with economic benefit to the communities that are hosting this. We don't want it to become a burden to the communities. Most folks who do outdoor recreation, except during COVID, are pretty respectful of what they have. And the biggest problem with COVID really was a clash between the Forest Service and their union not wanting to open and them not wanting anyone else to open their facilities. So we had to put facilities out there, especially on the south side of the lake, to keep the garbage moving and to make sure there's sanitary conditions for people. So those things can be overcome, but we want it to be, we want it to be something that brings in an economic benefit to whichever communities we're doing it in. And it doesn't, if we're talking about bike trails, it doesn't have to be necessarily only in the mountains. It just has to be something that we can promote as being fun. So like in the city I grew up in, when we moved back, you could ride on city streets from my house for about, I don't know what, I'll say 3 miles till you hit the bike trail. The bike trail went along the river. The bike trail then went all the way out to Michigan State University. So that was about another 5 to 8 miles, depending on which side of the campus you stopped on out there. So you could literally ride almost from anywhere in town. And there was trails in the north end of town too. Some public streets, some trails. But the point was all to ride your bike out to the MSU dairy, kind of like going to the Hanford dairy in Hanford, only on your bike. And so it was like a destination point. Now, did it make any money in between? Probably not, unless you want to stop and eat. And there was places where you could veer off, and go less than half a mile one way or another and go get burgers, go get tacos, go get whatever. But I think there just needs to be, generally what I've seen when these are super successful, there's someone outside of us that's the champion. It's their project. We're helping facilitate it. So I think it feels like we have a pretty good consensus on that. I don't know if there's other types of projects or other priorities you want us to put underneath there. There's a lot that we can build after today's meeting. We can build underneath facilitating projects. I don't know if anybody else has anything else that they would like to.
I think under play, one thing we might consider is the sheriff's office and their strategy in getting out in the community, being involved and really being looked at as, I think community policing is the term that's used. And I think the county can take similar approaches to build trust, build credibility, and in the long term, I think just create more cohesive relationships with the community. So community engagement, I think that works.
I don't know really how that necessarily applies with play, but I mean, I've lived in Madera County for 15 years and I've in 14 of those years or 13 of those years, I've never visited San Joaquin River. I've been to Bass Lake one time prior to that. And over the last couple of years, I mean, I've experienced so much more in this county. And the more you go up and visit these things, you discover more. I mean, I went to Miami Trails with my kids on dirt bikes. And I, coming to Bass Lake and staying at the cabins here. My son had a birthday, his friend's birthday party at the lake on the other side of the lake just on Saturday. And that little environment where you're lakeside, but it's less than an hour away from people on the valley floor. And there's a lot to highlight here. And
what do you think are the reasons that you didn't know about it? And
it just wasn't really advertised a whole lot. I mean, I've been to Shaver Lake multiple times, you know, and I think that was kind of the go-to place, but this, it's kind of a catch-22. You want it to be a hidden gem,
Yeah.
but you also want to highlight it as well.
Right.
You don't want
So
to,
it seems like it, the same point was brought up to me by a former county resident last week at RCRC. And he said basically what Supervisor Walmoff just said, you know, the last 20 years I lived there, I only went to Yosemite one time. I realized the majority of Yosemite is in Mariposa County. But the point I think is somehow we're not helping our chambers push local amenities to local people. By the same token, when I went to Avila Beach in August, July, August, I ran into 2 or 3 people who were like, oh, because I was wearing a Smoky Bear Run Bass Lake t-shirt. Oh, Bass Lake, I've got property in Court School, or I've been to Bass Lake 6 weeks ago. It's almost like, whereas some of our amenities are as well known out in the other 57 counties and used more by those people than they are by us. So I don't know if it's a board, if the board would like to see us work more to get the word out more
Do we have a map?
internally to our own county.
Do we have a map and a like a things to do in Madera County on our website? Do we have that?
Honestly, I don't know. I've
Okay.
got a map in my office that Rhonda gave me.
Yeah, I would
all
say
the
the
things to
Visitor
do, so-
Bureau does a pretty good job of putting that information out. Actually, last week I got a article that was sent over to me from the San Francisco Gate. And it's an article, you know, that was basically put together by the Visitors Bureau. You know, they had an influencer is what they call them, come out and they took them on a tour and, you know, showed them about all the different locations in the Oakhurst area in which you can stop to play. I think the article is entitled like one of the best kept secrets in California, or how to spend the perfect weekend in Oakhurst. And so those kind of things are out there. But I guess when I'm talking about community engagement, relationship building, I think part of that is going out and having those experiences so you can tell people about them. So our community or our county staff can tell people about those. So, you know, if you've got 5 staffers volunteering time with the stewards of the Sierra National Forest, you know, cutting trees off of bike trails, you know, up in the Grand Dome region, you know, that's experience that they're going to take back to their coworkers, to their friends, to their family. And then all of a sudden you've got, you know, 30 more people that know about how you play in Madera County. And it's kind of one of those things that tend to build upon themselves, I think. So I don't know, maybe some kind of volunteer program through the county. I've heard of those in different employer organizations where, you know, the organization is encouraging their team members to get out, volunteer with, you know, community-based organizations and really be a part of the community. I don't know if that fits better in live or play, but I think a lot of these things tend to, you know, have multiple categories in which they could sit under.
Good points. I was thinking earlier, I had a discussion with Darren Rose before a couple of weeks ago. And I said, is there anything the county can be doing to stimulate economic development? I asked him a series of questions and how can we help you and all of that. And he had some answers and he's still thinking about some of them. And I think, you know, I don't know how that relates to play, but I think he would be involved in that as well, because it is part of the economic development. The play, we have the recreational side of our economics in Madera County. So that's probably number 2 right now in generating income for Madera County. So and that's tourism and recreation and what have you. We've got the agricultural side and then that. And we're trying to dovetail. So, you just made me think of something. I ran into a girl at the end of the sessions there at RCRC, her job involves getting people into camping in agriculture. And like a dude ranch or
Right.
you've heard of this stuff.
Yeah.
anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. And that is a diversification of into the tourism and might be something even in these economic times that would help some farmers too. So that's a thought. I'm really interested in that big time.
Okay, that would be something that we could line up under helping to facilitate projects because.
Right.
I think
Yeah, it's
there's a
not
few
something we-
places I think
Not
there's a few
something we would
places in
do, it's
Madera,
something we would.
south of Madera that already do that. I
Right.
can't remember whose winery, but somebody was doing that. And then you have the whole glamping thing.
Yeah.
And all that, but you already have the one development up here that will move forward now that the lawsuit is behind us and
I think the thing I'm saying is that our policies from a planning standpoint should be such that we can make it easier to do these things. Because if we make it too costly, for a CUP or what have you, it's gonna kick people out of the realm of doing. So and licensing fees, that kind of thing. We need to really seriously take a look at how we can facilitate it so that we get the revenue from tourism rather than from the vendor.
okay, is that enough about
More
play for
thoughts?
right now?
Yeah.
No, and I feel like it's important for us to highlight, what we do have. I understand that we can help facilitate projects in the future, but we need to make sure that we remember what we have and help to promote that. I like the idea of having a list or a map of different amenities we have. I think it'd be great partnerships too with the.
And that can be done fun too. I mean, it's a map like that, it's just, you can really,
Easy.
depending on the web designer, they can really make it sing, and really be an attractive thing. Thank you.
Okay, so on the work side, we've already talked about our desire to fold these into work, or if for some reason work isn't the best place, what are the other two areas? But are there additional areas related to work that you'd like to see us implement?
When I think of work, I always seem to go towards economic development and what that looks like in terms of income for the residents that are here. And so if we as a county can put an emphasis on certain types of industry being here, you can to a certain degree, if you're successful, determine your fate when it comes to the income of the residents. Like having like in southeastern portion of Madera County, putting an emphasis on healthcare workers. Those are all very good income jobs. So I think putting an emphasis on bringing in business that will naturally attract higher income earners.
We've got the new AutoZone coming into Chowchilla. That's going to make a huge impact on that community. 300 good paying jobs. And you should see the size of their headquarters. It takes up a 40-acre piece, half of it. And it's just incredible what's happening there. It's exciting. And as a result, you're seeing a lot of little service industries pop up, which is exactly what happened.
So one of my priorities is being transparent with the public. And so nothing that we do at the county is secretive, or it should be. So to me, it's really important to share that information communicate that with the public. So I'd like to see an emphasis on that and us really highlighting it and working to achieve that. Because I feel like the more that the county is able to provide that information and us control that narrative, instead of other people, you know, we've all seen the reels on Facebook or the comments, and people make up their own narratives of it. So I think it's really important for us to be very transparent with the public and highlight what we are doing, what we're not doing.
Instead of saying we're transparent, being transparent.
Yeah.
I like that.
I appreciate that, the idea of being transparent. I think it should be a priority for the board as well as the county. You know, the one thing it brings me to, though, I think my second debate during the campaign, little old lady came up to me and she says, don't use the word transparent because it is a buzzword. And when I hear that word, I immediately think you're full of, you know what? And so I just wonder if there's a word we can use in place of transparency that might deliver the same message, but might kind of avoid that buzzword that
How about
has
openness?
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say it's a bad idea. I'm just trying to, you know, read the room a little bit and understand that, you know, some of these things like thrive, transparent.
Well,
these words that get-
What'll happen
Like-
is a few years from now, transparency will change to another word. Unfortunately, I think there's a whatever watchdog group called Open Government, so we probably don't want to use the term open government. We'll come up with a better term when we work that into a board priority.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bobby, because a lot of words become disingenuous in time because they're used so much. Like the word sustainable. I mean, you hear that so much. Well, what is sustainable? You know, you're like, okay,
And
Here we go with
I don't
this.
care what you call it. I just want to do it.
Okay,
yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
there you go. I think, looking at the first part there, I really like to see us, talk to Darren Rose. In that part as well. And, find out what his thoughts are as far as direction, because I think he has some good things to say on that. And he is our economic development director, so.
sure. And just so you know, staff wise, I know he meets on and off depending on the particular project with Matt, and I meet with him monthly.
Right.
So
Right.
we are connected. It sounds like he's still kind of getting his legs underneath him.
Yeah.
I think it's a good testament to, I know people think Bobby didn't work hard, but Bobby did work hard. We're just a tough sell. We're not on the ocean. We're not in San Diego, and
Right,
we're not where there's so much water that you can farm forever and ever. So
right. I found out, incidentally, of what you're saying, so true. Bobby is has been recognized nationally by a lot of different people, just talking to me, telling me, yeah, that he was like the bomb among economic development. So he really had it going on.
And talking with, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna mention in regards to the top one right there, the income from economic development, we're in Southeast Madera County and healthcare and so forth. That's a good idea, if not a great idea. But how do we build on that? And it was mentioned that we get more of those jobs in Madera County, then our income is, the demographic is higher and so forth. The problem that we've had is it really kind of depends on the school district to attract families to live in certain places. And I think that the perception is that in District 1 in particular, there are some quality school districts, so you're going to attract some higher income demographic people. I think the perception has been in Madera that maybe that isn't quite the case. And so you'll have a lot of, I don't know if anybody's noticed in Madera, but around lunchtime, you'll go to a restaurant and there's all these professional looking people. And it's just like, who are they? Well, they're people who travel from Clovis or Fresno to work in Madera as an engineer or a higher paid job. And guess what? They go home at night to Fresno and Clovis because, or maybe the Ranchos or someplace, because the perception is that their kids are not going to get a quality education in mid-year schools. Now, I think that's turning around. We've got a world champion robotics team, and so we've got a lot of things to be proud of. But there's but again, perceptions are, not everybody's going to be in robotics. So now this, and it's a long-term difficult thing because it's not something that we can do as a county. It has to be a partnership with our county schools, our local school districts. And they've got their own boards and they've got a whole different, set of rules and protocols and things they have to follow, and also opinions. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, as that's a way to attract a higher income demographic. And I think to have people, because I think there are some high paying jobs in Madera. It's just getting people to live there. And so I think and I don't have any solutions. I'm just saying that that's an issue that we need to recognize as perhaps a barrier that we need to overcome.
Well, and to that point, it dovetails with the idea of a workforce, because educating the workforce for work, we have a problem in some areas getting people that are qualified to do certain work. So I think there is something to be said for partnering with school districts and talking to school districts. Not only this, but they directly affect the housing element of the county because of the statutory fees. So there's a relationship there that needs to be developed so that we can talk about where that line might be. And I know they don't get enough money in statutory fees to build new schools, but there's got to be a line of affordability. And if you cross that line, you're essentially creating a moratorium on building. And because I've had several projects in the past where I think one was in Madera that their fees were $6 a foot. And that was it. It killed it. They were like, well, we can't afford that. Because you're looking at $12,000 to the school district out of the gate, 2,000 square foot home. And that's just the beginning. So there is a relationship. And then of course we have the college, which I'll be going to their breakfast soon. And how can we help them? And how can we that foster their expansion and their input into economic development?
All the way back to county's job is foster not just the local relationships, but enough relationships with our partners that do all those things to attract the businesses that create the income for our residents. And
maybe make them aware, but their job is to educate children. We get that, but maybe make them aware of the other aspects of how they affect us as well in our job of stimulating economic development.
I just like to mention, I brought it up in the past and it wasn't received very well.
Really? Startling.
What was not received well again?
What I was talking about in terms of, what's one of the number one things that a family looks
Oh.
at.
You're right. You're spot on, dude.
Well, I was one of those that was in the Madera Unified area. My kid went there for 1 year and I transferred him to Golden Valley. And I know that that could make a lot of people mad, but the things I saw, I wasn't happy with. And ultimately I made a move to that area as well, mainly because of the school district. And not to say that they aren't turning some things around, because I think that's absolutely the case in some areas. And I haven't taken a deep dive in Madera Unified, so this isn't a dig on them necessarily, but when you bring up the sports and the robotics and all these ancillary things, it brings other things up as well. And I know they're working, like Matilda Torres, which is in District 1. They are, in the middle of building a $35 million sports complex or sports stadium. I mean, when you do those types of things, it attracts more and it brings everyone up. Really believe that. But partnering with the college, I think is great. I did a tour with Madera Community College and the things that they're doing, they have other vocational type stuff like truck driving, but they really are putting an emphasis on those higher income jobs as well, more related to healthcare and getting into nursing and those types of things. So partnering with them, but I went to their strategic planning event a couple months back, and I put an emphasis to them on, tying vocational jobs into being a business owner as well. Because, you can be a $25 an hour HVAC tech, but you can also be a $300,000 a year earner by owning and operating your own HVAC business. And
There's a shortage of those people.
So,
Trades.
fostering those types of relationships, not just with Madera Community College, but, the school districts and all those other things.
Workforce development as well, I think, is another good one to have in there as far as partnerships. And then I think these could fall under live just as easily as work, but I think it's important to call them out, and especially how they can create some barriers for folks that are trying to work, or which broadband and public transportation, I think, are two things that are well within our sphere of influence, and that we can look to improve upon, which will create a better work environment, perhaps bring more higher paying jobs, to Madera. Remote working, huge trend, obviously, and being able to capitalize on that phenomenon, I think, requires us to have robust broadband services throughout the county.
Good thoughts. Yeah, the thought occurs to me when you said what you said about you moved your family. Parents are servants to their children, and whatever serves their children well, that's what they're going to seek. And that's the kind of environment we need to create if we can foster that environment to families. If that's what we're targeting, we want to foster that kind of environment.
Anything else on work? So I think it's a perfect place to stop, because we're gonna.
Right.
They're
Break
gonna
for
start
lunch.
serving the food here in about 5 minutes. So appreciate everybody's
Thank you.
participation. That's Regina.
I think when we came back from closed session, I wasn't here to report out that there was no reportable action from your closed session.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll recess for lunch. And we are continuing the workshop. And I'll turn it over to Jay.
Okay, when we broke there for lunch, we were just finishing up the work side of live, work, and play. I didn't know if there's any additional items you wish to talk about this right now, or we can return to it at the very, very end. And the next thing on your agenda is to go over the legislative platform. So any last offerings on work?
I have a comment. So I was, we talk about transparency. Well, I'm going to be transparent. So I'm sitting here this morning and I'm going, I'm just not connecting. I don't know why, but it's like, okay, we've got these things and I'm trying to come up with stuff, and I'm reading, this thing and just kind of reading stuff off of it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was going, what's wrong? How come I'm not making that connection? And I think it's because what's the next step? Okay, we come up with these things, but if we don't have a follow-up, a system of checks, and where are we, what's the progress we're making, what's the program, then it almost becomes, why are we doing this? For instance, I was talking to Jordan earlier about our, San Joaquin Valley counties thing that's coming up in a few days. And I've talked to you about it.
Right.
What's our purpose with that thing? Because we meet every year, everybody hustles. Oh yeah, we got to hit this program and blah, blah, we got axe throwing and all these things. But beyond that, is it just a social thing, or is there a purpose behind it, a greater purpose to kind of help us, navigate things as a region? And so with this, it's great. And I think it's important to do it, but it's like, to me, it's the execution and, moving forward that really counts, and I think that's kind of what and I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It's just, I guess I need to have assurances that, we have something that we're going to be moving forward on, that we're going to be following the progress of, that there's going to be some well-defined few priorities. Not everything's a priority,
Right.
can be a priority, everything's out there. And so anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure. No, I understand what you're saying, and that's part of what we would do when we bring back a synthesis of this in your existing strategic plan. My anticipation is at that point, there may be some really specific things you want us to measure, accomplish, and timeline. And we would add that and then bring back the final version to you in
Good.
that. And
Good.
just to that point, so last year's speakers at SJV RICC, some were good, some were not necessary really. So what we tried to do this year in terms of lining up speakers was to line up speakers that were either, very top of the group, meaning like the keynote speaker tomorrow, Dr. Thornburg. Some of you have heard him speak before, some of you haven't. The thing I like about him is he's always wanting to learn things. He does know some things about the Valley. He took the time to call and talk with myself. And I can't remember. I don't think Joel was on that call, just to say, okay, what's going on? Do you know that this good thing is actually going on in the Valley? And I said, no, I had no idea, because we're so focused on all the bad things that are happening with water and the storm and all these other things. So that might be good to wrap in your conversation. And then on Thursday, for that particular one, we tried to make all of the panels really worthwhile. So
Right.
we got one on water.
Right.
We actually got both of the executive director in this of RCRC and this,
Mhm.
if you recall, the CEO from CSAC wasn't able to make it to Kings County last year. He is committed to being here Thursday. And then we have getting the legislators was the most difficult, because we had them and then we didn't, and we had them and it's back and forth. So we're basically down to two. And I guess the good news side of that is it's two that affect us, Assemblymember Patterson and Senator Caballero. So I guess since we're hosts, that's good for us. We didn't try to make it only about this immediate area, because we didn't want the other counties to flee. And then the legislative panel should be worthwhile too, based on the timing. I mean, it's signature time. It's time to think about next year, and we'll have a couple of federal legislative advocates there too, to tell us what in the world's going on with the government slow down or shut down, or what happened to our proposals that made it up to this. I mean, will they be dead forever? Or, are they just dead until they send a budget, or what's really going on with some of those things?
Well, and I think, no, that's great. No, it sounds like a great program. And I'm just thinking about, and then Friday is the business, part of the meeting, I think.
Yeah, that's generally pretty brief.
That's pretty brief. And see, that's where I think we really need to talk about what else can we do and that's not, and I know we're getting off talking about
Right.
that and not
I know that's a good point. We had thought about.
Right. It's kind of like, because, we've got the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council, all about transportation, all about housing. There's advocacy, boom, 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 all over the place. I think we could do the same thing with that group, and because they, my colleagues on that council, they want to talk about water and this and that. That's really not that appropriate, but it would probably be more appropriate for something like this. So I guess I'm just saying that I always look for purpose, what is, and education's good, but I think we just need to be reminded, what if the purpose of that committee is for one thing, or it can be expanded into something else that's more of a living type of, active, a force to be reckoned with, a force to be known, that sort of thing. And so anyway, it just kind of goes back to this. I'm glad to hear that we're, and I never doubted. I'm just kind of just throwing that out there, that I think that knowing that, we really need to whittle this down and hone it to make it more of an effective type of, and really establish those priorities that we can work on and move forward on and accomplish.
To your point, goals have to be achievable, number one. I think they have to be worthy. Like I said this morning, they need to be something that accomplishes something significant. And then achievable, and then measurable, and then evaluated. And those three things are super important along the way. So, yeah, when we first started doing this in 2015, it was a 5-year plan. So when we hit 2020 and COVID kind of blew everything up, which was kind of a year of reconstituting, we didn't really get to have this goal setting thing as much as we anticipated previously with the staff and all that. But before that, we did do quite a bit of evaluation on that. I remember Melissa bringing the progress and updates on where we were in those programs in the strategic plan. And it was really effective, and we accomplished a lot as a county. I know a lot is not a word, but a bunch. How about that? We accomplished a great deal. And so I do agree with you. We're not in this just for the exercise. We want to get something done, and being a part of a committee, why have the committee if you're not going to get anything done, right?
Okay. All right. So with that, the next thing is the legislative platform. I brought copies for everybody. This was last redone in 2022. Maybe just take a few minutes just to refamiliarize yourself with all the areas. And then what I'd like to do is go through all the board members and to see, I know that you all have areas that you're particularly interested in. And I wanted to see what your input is on the different areas and go from there. The department heads will be going over this also later this afternoon, and then tomorrow when we get back together, we'll probably review collectively what the two sides have come up with. Then you have Paul Yoder coming tomorrow also, and maybe there's even some things that he brings up or that your legislators bring up on Thursday that you may want to either support or not support in terms of what's going on at the state level.
Maybe we could start with the overview of the general principles. Does anyone have any direct comments and thoughts on page 6, general principles of see any areas for improvement in there or change?
Oh, yes, thank you. Turn it.
There you go.
State's doing more and more things, sometimes through the proposition process, sometimes through other processes to avoid the unfunded mandate process. In fact, at the county, the RCRC level and the CACE level, we've been talking about making sure that everyone's making their claims for anything that's a state mandate that we should be making claims for underneath existing legislation, because it just seems like they kind of slide a little bit more each year into the county's budget without sliding the same amount of money. Another thing that they're doing is like with the incompetent to stand trial, not care court, but your standard incompetent to stand trial folks. They're establishing a new process that involves you have a baseline number that you can have, and if you go over the baseline of people in the incompetent to stand trial pipeline, then they're going to penalize you, and then they're going to give you the money back. So in some ways, the state is taking money that they allotted to you and then forcing you to spend it where the state wants you to spend it, not where the individual counties want to engage that. So I don't know if we can come up with something that makes sense and just isn't, word garbage. We would add that for your consideration when we provide you with a draft of this.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems as if a lot of this platform was developed with the help of department heads and various.
It was,
Yeah.
When Darren has been responsible for the last, I think, 2 revisions, and he's been the one gathering input from the department heads to put into your plan.
That's great, because they're gonna, be the subject experts and know what's coming down the pike and so forth. So anyway, thank you.
I don't know about anybody else, but myself, I'm gonna need a little bit of time to digest this amount of material.
Okay,
And-
so why don't we just not rapid fire necessarily, but without reading word for word, just kind of stroll through this and see if
Yeah,
it
that's a good
triggers
idea.
anything related to current legislation or upcoming legislation that you've heard about that you really don't want to see come back, or you really do want to see come back. So
That sounds good, Jim.
on the administration side, I would suggest that we need to reword our specific proposals, just because the state's engagement of homelessness has changed a little bit. And one of the things that this board has talked about consistently isn't just the response to existing homelessness, but how do we keep it from going there in the first place? And then for some individuals, allowing the ease with which they remain homeless. I don't know if there's an idea there in terms of for a legislative platform that can be included, but it does seem that that's been a concern of the board on an ongoing basis. So I'm glad to try to craft something in there like that.
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier on, I think a significant portion of homeless people are so impaired, they're a danger to themselves and danger to society. And our question is, why aren't they institutionalized? Why aren't these people taken out of wherever they're at, the slough, off the road, wherever, and institutionalized for the safety of the public and themselves? And it's just not happening. You get sued and I don't know. And it needs a legislative fix to.
So we had
Care
a,
court is designed to address that with conservatorship. Essentially, they go through a court process. Now, there are all kinds of opposition to it. But the intent is that there are a certain amount of people who are on the street who cannot care for themselves.
Right.
And instead of going through the criminal process, they go through the separate care court process where they'll be adjudicated and could be placed on conservatorship. There are, like I said, the opposition to it are essentially you are medically incarcerating a person. That's the opposition. But I've told countless stories of,
Right.
It's not. It is not. I can't think of the word. It is not. It's not okay to let these people live the way that they're living. That is not compassion.
No,
That's the
it
word I was
isn't.
looking for. A lot of people think it's compassionate to try to get them into services. Well, if they won't accept the services, which many of them don't accept the services, it's not compassionate to leave these people on the street doing what is. I mean, a lot of these people are gravely disabled. So I think that will.
So maybe the concept then of supporting the actions of care court in our legislative platform. Does that sound right to you?
But seeking. I mean, I don't know all the details of care court, but getting people like the sheriff and the DA involved in, mostly the DA, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be left shouldering the burden
Right.
of a lot of this, and letting them dive in. And they'll, in my opinion, they're the experts to
So maybe
address that.
for your legislative platform, kind of the focus is on money, because this is what we learned last week at RCRC. We had a moderated panel with 3 of the pilot counties. And so you've got the entities that Supervisor Wamhoff already mentioned. You've got the court, you've got BHS, you've got other providers, you've got the family members of the folks who are engaged with family members who have those issues. And a couple of high points that came out. Care courts for everybody who's having these problems, not just the homeless people. But if the homeless people are in crisis, then we got to figure out what, and this is the purpose of the pilot, what metrics have to be reached for someone who's not I live in the same house with this person and observe them every day kind of person, to get them in front of the judge for care court. Number 2, you've got people going in front of a judge for something that's not a criminal offense. So that's totally new for the judges. It's totally new for all of us, right? So my guess will be at some point very early on, someone's going to sue, because to be blunt, they're really going to have to, because taken to its worst degree, taking crime and placing them in taking them against their will off the street, taking them to a secure location, all that, that's not really what the Constitution's about, right? But it's not compassionate just to leave them out there living in their dirt, either in a position where they may not even know who they are. So the biggest concerns that came out of the last few questions of the panel were the lack of facilities, unlocked or locked, because the state government's actually now starting to talk a little bit about having some locked facilities. They used to be like, you don't talk about that, right? You can't do that. Can't talk about that. And used properly, locked facilities can be okay. I mean, if people are just going to run away again, what's the point in picking them up, right?
Right.
But if you keep them in a locked facility long enough for them to come to themselves, they sober up enough to realize, I didn't realize how bad I was, or at least sober up enough to get to a point where they can start gaining treatment to be successful. That's great. The other thing is who's paying for this treatment and how is it going to be paid for? And it's super expensive, we're Bass Lake, it's very nice. The room prices are the room prices, right? It's what the market will bear. Well, it's super regulated to run one of these facilities, and it can cost $1,800 a day to put somebody in one of these places. So you can imagine, in a small county that has few resources, if they put 2 or 3 people in a facility for 6 months, that's a lot of money. It's $1,800 a day, right? So I would suggest to you that, and maybe it's fitted better later in the platform, that we put some language in there about advocating for counties to be fully supported in their efforts to do these. Another thing I think we need to do, just from an admin side, but there is no county that has enough facilities. So why wouldn't we work with Mariposa, ourselves? Well, I'll go north, Merced and Stanislaus, and build a regional facility that we get X number of guaranteed beds in so that we don't get shoved out, but we always have access in an amount that coincides with the amount of volume that we'd have. And I would think that the state would want to finance that, but maybe not. So
Sense, economy of scale. Rather than one institution bearing the burden. More multiple institutions.
And Chair, I'll just add to what Jay mentioned. A couple weeks ago, I went to the County Council Association annual meeting. And there was a care court workshop, and some of those counties that have been going through the trial run, Glenn, Orange, and San Diego were on this particular panel. And a lot of what I heard just with the way that I'm listening is there are a lot of legal complications that they're also trying to work out in the implementation, almost some impossibilities in the law in terms of what they're requiring us to do. And they're also getting, County Counsel's office are also doing the meetings with the judges and the families. There's also a lot of families that are saying it's not enough, that we should be able to force the care. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a lot of that as well.
I'm sure there'll be legal challenges to it. So in our area, it's Tuolumne, Stanislaus, and then Glenn farther north. Riverside is one of the southern counties, and I don't recall who the other two counties are. Okay, I don't know that you have any input on clerk recorder because we don't get into her elections processes. On the HR side, I guess one of the things they're beginning to run into with not just us as an employer, but our educational institutions in our area, and obviously the other employers, there's just, I don't know, there's not a candidate pool, there's a candidate puddle. So I would like to see the state do more to facilitate our kids going to college into careers that we all need, you know, like Dan Riley was telling him, I can't get an engineer to come out and design these things. He's having to spend his time doing his own engineering because his one engineer left, I believe, and went someplace in another part of the state that paid more, and the last one didn't work out. So now he's back to none. Well, we're not encouraging kids either through STEM programs or other programs and through some financial incentives to get these advanced degrees in these areas that we're not literally dying, but I mean, we could sit here and make a fairly lengthy list of positions, even in the county, that there's enough qualified people applying for them. And historically in our area, it's been pretty much shown that if they get an education, they'll stay in this area. So some don't. I mean, it's a sheriff's office. We still get some folks that attend there for an internship and then they're headed to the Bay Area to work because they have relatives there and because the signing bonuses are even bigger than what we have. But we can't win with those, but at least they go out and they tell their friends, hey, you know, we had a great time at this internship there. You should go there too. And then maybe we pick off the ones who want to stay local. So I'm not familiar with any other threats or advancements right now under the HR bulletin. So we'll give you one related to education that's for your consideration. If it's good, great. If it's not, not. The treasurer's office only has this one here on Pilt. I'm not super familiar with that one from the state. We have been receiving our federal payment in lieu of taxes. So I'll have to get with Tracy and see what's going on with this one and why we haven't been paid or why no one's been paid in so long. I'm sure there has to be some quote logical reason. Either they've substituted it with a different fund or they're just claiming that they don't have the funds to pay us. In community and economic development, we'll have to do a lot of updating there because there's even newer legislation there. I don't know if there's any areas that really stick out to you. We talked about that a lot under work and live. So,
something that strikes me under housing and community economic development, land use planning, is that the general public is not aware of their ability in general to add additional dwelling units. There's a lack of education on that subject. How far can they go with it? And what, what can be done with it? So I wonder how we might help educate people, because I think this would be very helpful. I know in families especially, parents are helping their children. I am. I'm doing that for my kids, trying to help them and figure out the ins and outs of getting into a home. That's one area that we could probably do a little bit of public education.
Okay. Got it noted.
Jay, I'm not sure if this fits well in public safety or under CEQA. I think CEQA is a natural spot. But Assemblyman Patterson's had some legislation out there the last 2 cycles in which there would be a categorical exemption for CEQA in the event we're building an evacuation route. And I think, that needs to be a priority for the county, and a good way to help facilitate, creating more evacuation routes is obviously by getting that categorical exemption approved by the state. The legislation failed the last 2 years. Patterson's not going to continue, so I don't know if someone's going to try to introduce that again next year, but would certainly love to see the support of this board if it comes back again.
We'll note that on there.
Yeah, I would, and regarding the CEQA or potential amendments to CEQA, I know it's on here, and I think it's vitally important for economic development when you're talking about opposition groups using CEQA as a club to stop projects. Typically, people who proclaim to be small government people now want to use the big government club of CEQA to stop projects from happening close to their home. And so anything that we can do to improve that process, or at least go back to the original intent of why CEQA was there in the first place, instead of finding these loopholes to arduously block projects.
And I don't know if it's in here, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but
Sure.
I think we need a speedier process, of a trimmed process in CEQA for emergency type project, when we consider like groundwater recharge as an example. For the next however many years, it's going to be an emergency. It is an emergency. It's been an emergency. And we need to be able to have a very swift process to react to that emergency. And I'm sure there are other examples as well. I don't know if we don't have to go through CEQA for our tree thinning program, do we? Bobby?
Yeah, that's going to depend on where we're doing that work. So
Right.
theoretically, if we're doing it in the counties right away, no, we don't have to do CEQA. It's kind of how we did the project here around Bass Lake. But yeah, theoretically, you are going to have to do CEQA if you're in an area where it's not defined. So
Right. So that would be another area.
And another thing we might add into here with community and economic development is issues of land access, particularly, our public lands, Sierra National Forest, or even Yosemite. There's the land management access plan, and thank you again to the board for being proactive and working with NPS on that. But, we often see bills introduced, that would prevent access into the Sierra National Forest. I think just last December, there was some federal legislation that was introduced that would create a national monument out of the Sierra National Forest, which would, essentially stop any new uses within the forest and restrict existing uses. So I think it's important, being that tourism is a priority for this board, that we're aware when, changes to land access are made, or if there's potential changes down the pipe, that we're engaged on those issues.
Okay, the only thing we have currently under education is related to the library. Health and Human Services, it's gonna need some updating. CalAIM is still being implemented. You have all of the current MHSA and BHSA and bond related either bills or proposition that are gonna come up from now through the March ballot. Paul Yoder will probably talk more about that tomorrow, so we don't need to discuss it here. We'll allow you to hear his presentation, then listen to what you'd like to see us add in there in terms of legislative priorities. Some of these things may actually come off of here depending on what the state of the legislation is. Care Court is listed specifically on page 16. We'll need to update that and add in some of the things that you mentioned. Child support services. I don't have anything there for you. Again, we'll touch base with Sarah on that. She's not here this week because of a family issue. They may be similar or they may be different. I haven't heard any new topics come up in CSS.
Yeah, earlier I mentioned the statistic that I think it's 30% of American homes are without fathers. And under that, I know we help encourage and facilitate a lot of programs where there's like big brothers, big sisters. That's really important. And then there's other First Five. There's several other programs that are involved. Even the foster care program is involved with a buddy of mine does a wakeboarding program for foster kids. And in that process, he really gains a mentor relationship with them and they just gravitate to him. He's that kind of person anyway. But we want to encourage that kind of thing. That's facilitate and foster that as much as possible for these children to have adequate input into their lives, mentorships.
Got that.
You know what? We haven't heard from our chiefs, but I want to encourage you guys to comment along the way, if you think of something, because you know our minds too a little bit. You've been there alongside of this. So if you think of something as well in the live, work, play area as well, jot it down and pass it off to Jay or we can talk about it here. It'd be great.
Jay, I'm not sure where this would fit in with our legislative platform, or maybe it doesn't. But I think it would be important if all of our legislative representatives are engaged with the community. And specifically what I'm speaking to is earmarks. We have one congressional representative that, touches Madera County who refuses to do earmarks. And I think it's putting, his district at a disadvantage. And I don't know if it's appropriate for us to include something in our legislative platform, that perhaps speaks to that. But I know for myself and many other, counterparts that are within that individual's district have a strong feeling about that. So I don't know if that is appropriate again, if we can include that, but
Tried to work with that is we send those projects to the Senate side of the federal government, since they cover the entire state, and try to give them a good enough explanation that they, see it as a worthy project compared to the others and agree to fund it. We have one such project that's still alive, but that would primarily benefit the mountain communities. I don't know what's going to happen since the government might shut down, but we found that to be a successful way to pitch certain things. Where it does become difficult is with your congressman, you can get more into a particular road project or a particular water and sewer project. And we were actually successful on that side with a particular road project in the valley, again, assuming it doesn't all fall apart because of the congressional shutdown. But I understand the concern. You know, that person's very adamant about not doing any kind of earmark based things. People have different opinions on it. Some people say that's great. Other people say, well, Congress is going to give the money out. Why does my district not get any? So it's a, you know, double-edged sword kind of thing. But certainly if that process comes up again in the next year, we would work with the districts that fall into that congressional district and see if there are projects that we can pitch more on the Senate side that the senators would accept the value that we see in them and carry them forward. So.
Jay, I'd just like to mention that Bobby and I talked about it earlier, and Supervisor Chiesa from Stanislaus County, that this certain congressman represents as well, actually made a comment to a staff a couple weeks ago in DC about the earmark process, and let him know, because even Ron Paul, there's certain legislation he didn't support, but he'd still have earmarks in case it passed. And then I reminded this particular congressman was not there, but his chief of staff was there, and I reminded him that we're on the ground, we're here to deliver for our constituents, and I can appreciate his ideology and 30,000-foot philosophy, but it doesn't help his district and doesn't help people on the ground, and he needs to start delivering. So that message was delivered.
Good, thank you for sharing that with the group. Economically speaking, if you're going to maintain that level of not participating in the earmark process, it should be because you're really close to cutting the earmark process altogether so that Congress doesn't spend all the money. And some people would say, well, if you participate, then you're just part of the problem. I don't know. I guess I've been more pragmatic than that. Whether I vote yes or no, they're going to vote yes to spend this money. So why don't I get some of that money for that particular project here that's, not going to get done without it and may have to do with life, health, or safety of my constituents. I don't have to make it worse, but if they're going to, it's kind of like, some people are strongly against grants, and grants can be a dangerous trap, right? If we get this grant and now we have to hire 10 people to support the grant, and we don't have the money to hire the people, we just shot ourselves in the foot. But if the money's going to be there, I don't know if a grant was available and it wasn't going to put you at greater risk, you'd always apply for that grant, right? So,
right. Well, I think your philosophy a couple of days ago when I talked to you about this very issue, and you said, and it just stuck with me, and it was really a great point to me. I don't support, let's say, the expenditure of money. I'm supporting the people that I represent. I think there's
a particular project you were supporting, getting the money to come into Madera County to help a disadvantaged community. That didn't mean you were necessarily supporting the other entity tied to that, right?
Right.
So.
You can't tie it to, it doesn't have to be tied to support of that necessarily. That was good.
Okay, the next one is Community Action Partnership and Victim Services. It's probably pretty complex. Probably want to, I guess, both of that and public health and maybe even social services, since they work together so much. I would ask that you just read those and come back with comments, unless you have comments right now today, because I know all three of those are important to all of you.
Do we know what shelter capacity, or if there are shelter capacity issues right now for DV?
For domestic violence, so they're quite full, but I think they still have openings. And Maddie has been fairly aggressive in trying to grow the capacity of the shelter by acquiring access to additional living space.
Yeah, I was just curious to see how much of a pressing issue it is right now to make it a priority.
I think the thing that's killer for us is there's almost no outside of DV I mean, I know sometimes we tongue in cheek say things about certain businesses, but if there wasn't a certain motel in the Madera area, we wouldn't have any place to put a whole lot of people who need a whole lot of housing assistance. So that's where we're really hurting, is almost any other kind of housing, whether it's emergency housing, maybe not so much because we can get multiple vendors to participate in that, but the transitional age housing for the fosters that are coming out, and for those people who actually want to get out of the homelessness cycle, we're going to have to do something soon. I mean, our project at the Mission should be done, March. I don't remember now. Rob wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't have any backup on that one, but that thing's going to fill up almost like that. So for those people who are in there and utilizing those services, that'd be great. They're out of the river, they're off the mountain, whatever it is. But up here, we tried 2 different locations. The folks wanted so much money to house these folks that it was impractical. We've tried using, I think we were going to use CDBH money for one of them. CDBG, sorry, for one of them, but the property owner wouldn't come anywhere near what the appraised value really was for the property. So I think we're okay on the DV emergency shelter side, but frankly, you can never have too much capacity. It just doesn't seem like it. So yes.
I think noting, Jay, to add our issues with Medi-Cal reimbursement rates for the hospital situation. I think we need to add that into a platform somewhere, whether it's under administration or health and human services, but some type of
That would be social.
reform. It's pretty
Good
it's
point.
relevant.
I think that is kind of included in key issues, access to healthcare services. I think it says support healthcare reimbursements that is proportional to healthcare burdens of counties. It might be a good place to just kind of expand upon what supervisors saying there.
Yeah, focus on it a little bit, right?
Paragraph for you on.
Looking at page 21, the bottom of the page.
There you go.
Got it. They're like the third bullet.
Jumping ahead.
Yep, correct.
Thanks, Bob.
So we may go into some specifics there because you're right. Those rates have got to get fixed. Okay. Veteran services, any input on current issues at the state level for veteran services? Okay, and the last section is broadly general government, but there's a number of items underneath that. One is IT. I guess a concern that staff has is, and I don't know that we need the state to solve it for us, but they always seem to have way more money than we do. Keeping the network safe gets more and more expensive and more time intensive. And the insurers, and rightly so, each year require more and more things to be in place for them to insure you fully for a loss. So if the board's okay with it, I will review this one and see if there's a, without sounding like a whiny local government that wants money, but a way to encourage the state to, somehow pass along some funding for some part of that, because our staff does a great job pushing back on this stuff. I mean, I think I've gotten 3 phishing attempts in the last month, and they're getting better and better. They come from an email that you might even recognize about a topic that you've talked about before. And then if you're not careful, they end up clicking on the last 2 I got, instead of having PDF attachments, they had spreadsheet attachments that when you clicked on it, it had this other funky window that was supposed to be it was like password protector or something. I'm sure if you would have clicked on it, it would have said, hey, enter this information, you can get it. But I didn't. I just sent it to IT and they were bogus. So county council, I don't know if you have anything in your section or clerk of the board, if you have anything while we're sitting here on page 26, both of you are. And if not, certainly feel free to forward it later, but I don't think there's anything Brown Act related, at least at this point, pondered for the coming legislative year. Is that pretty accurate?
So there are some potential changes to the Public Records Act that we're monitoring, campaign donations, that law. I want to look into that and do a presentation to the board in terms of conflicts of interest. There were some requests to change that brand new law. And so that one, I'm hoping to come back and present to the board on now that the session is closed, but in terms of bigger areas, I'll let you know, Jay. There's a lot of legislation.
Ag has a pretty lengthy section here. We'll get the input from Rusty and Steve Monk on that one, and then the last or next, almost last version is water and natural resources.
I've got one on invasive weed management funding. We also need to add into that simplified permits for rundle removal and doing work in flood control channels, particularly Corps of Engineers and Fish and Wildlife. That permitting process was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it took us 4 years, 4 years to get the permits, and the amount of work that was put into that, volume of work and the amount of money they required. It's just insane. That's absolutely insane.
And I know with the amount of water that, we got in January, February with the snowpack and subsequent water, there was a emergency declaration by Newsom. And I know some of these proposals, they kind of touch on water storage and things like that, but something that is more permanent. So if like some sort of bill where if there is something declared by the state or even as a county of excess water, that people can expeditiously take that water for recharge purposes.
Zing. Love it.
Our rain season here is so strange. It has so many valleys and then peaks. But so does the rain year begin October? It doesn't follow the calendar year. It doesn't go January to December. It goes like September, October to the following year, doesn't it?
I thought it was July 1st for a while, and I think it might be.
It's later
So
in the year.
not that we need to get into the weeds of figuring it out, but if in a particular storm you got X amount of precipitation, or if, in my head, I'm thinking, if you already know that you got 130% of an annual year's rainfall by end of last January, is there a way we can make it automatic so that they can't just, so we don't have to wait? We don't have to wait for it. We don't have to wait.
Yeah,
for
something
it
on
to
the books there,
Sarah.
a trigger point where people can legally access
Whatever that might be.
canals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that legislative fix on that issue, and I pointed that out to Senator Caballero as well as Assemblywoman Soria. Of course, some of the others know that. Along with it, I love that. Thank you for thinking of that.
I'm sorry, what was it, Rob? October 1st?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Somewhere near October, November. Along with that particular item that you just mentioned, one thing for our region in particular, and this is a federal issue, but is the management cycle of the dam. And that's Bryant. Bryant Dam is managed on a year-to-year cycle, a 12-month cycle. It needs to be shifted to a 5-year management cycle. In other words, they cannot manage the dam with the idea of saving water from year to year. And it's ridiculous because we know events come in cycles and they come about every 5 to 7 years. So they need to be able to manage that thing based on a 5-year cycle so that they can legitimately store water during times of when we don't have plenty. And I addressed this with the dam manager. And he absolutely agreed with me. He thought that was something we could really help if we could get that done.
But again,
The dam manager.
I want to speak to the dam manager. Anyways, I would think they would make it easier for the local people to fully manage the whole, I mean, because when I look at Bryant, I mean, everything else backs up from there, right? All the way up to Mammoth Pool. I think it'd make it easier for everybody to make sure that there's usable water around
Yes.
going into a drought year instead of having to artificially push it down to a level that if it doesn't rain next year, it starts to look super ugly like San Luis did last year before the rains, right?
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, next is public protection. I don't know if you have any input there, and it's includes the sheriff's office, probation, district attorney, and
Yeah.
thank you. Yep, fire.
It's the other one, 55.
57, 47.
And then go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just, well, Sally had mentioned some time ago as well about how early releases are not necessarily being done in compliance with what was originally adjudicated, and that there's no real auditing purpose.
Is that related to Proposition 57?
I don't know if that
Think,
was
or-
57 or AB 109. But what they're currently doing is not congruent with even the statute that's on the books in how it relates to early release. If someone is sentenced to X number of years, they're being let out based on CDC's recommendation or CDC's determination, not even what was originally adjudicated by the judge. So something along the lines of,
So there's no truth in sentencing.
there's no truth in sentencing, and some sort of push to have or affirm the truth in sentencing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's frustrating for victims if somebody says someone's going away for 10 years and 24 months later they see them walking down the street. I think it would be easier to push through the grief cycle to know that they're only going away for 2 years and they actually go away for the full 2 years and be done with it. So
Yeah, fed 80%.
yeah.
There's no such thing on the state side.
Well, I think in some ways we've become too comfortable with it because even back when I worked in Dallas, we were under a federal consent decree, and even the prisoners knew that they were only serving like 23 days for each year of their sentence. I had one guy for a felon. He was a very pleasant person, but he sat in the back seat with the other officer calculating how long he would be in jail for this 10-year felony he had just committed. And it was making the other officer unhappy because he was a rookie. And I was like, no, he's right. He's not saying that to make you angry. He's literally sitting there in the seat doing the math going, oh, that's February. Yeah, I'll be out in December. Just like something to plan his life around. And that's sad for the victim of his burglary to think, good, I won't see this person won't be creeping around my house for 10 years. It's like, oh no, it'll be like 10 months and he might be back. So
Sad for society.
Right. And again, much better to know what they're truly sentenced to and truly going to serve than to think it's some big,
Yeah.
long process and turns out not to be.
And I'd be in favor of an almost outright appeal of 47, just a terrible law. Just saw today that Target's closing 9 stores, 3 of which are in the Bay Area because
Yeah.
of retail theft.
Well, when I went into the Office Depot to buy these Sunday, the person there was super nice. And he was explaining to me that he was checking out a customer's stuff last weekend prior. And while he's checking this guy's stuff out, somebody just came in, grabbed some stuff and ran out. And the customer asked him, well, aren't you going to do something about that? He goes, yeah, we're really kind of, supposed to be hands off and whatever. And the customer asked him, well, then why am I paying? And then, I'm not advocating stealing, but that's a legitimate question in the mind of the average consumer, right? So I'm paying bigger prices so that these people can just run in and steal what they want. Let's get back to where there's some consequences for not respecting other people's property. That's what it really comes down to. So, but we seem to be at the state level passing more laws to mitigate Prop 47 instead of just backing out Prop 47.
Right.
But there's case law that says you can't modify a proposition with legislative action. But I'm sure there's still something they could do to mitigate the worst parts of that. So. And the last is public works. And we talked about that quite a bit earlier. I don't know if there's any particular things related to, I know that a constant frustration for us as a board is the state mantra that they don't want to do any projects that expand capacity for motor vehicles, even though the majority, or if not every rural county like ours, is dependent on motor vehicles to survive. So
That was going to be my comment, was in regards to the state's policies around capacity building. And if there's any legislation or opportunity for us to support changes in that, I think it would be in our best interest.
So because it's been discussed, I think Matt has actually discussed it with Mr. Metz, and others have discussed, I'll call it more reasonable possibilities to expand Highway 41, not necessarily to a 4-lane event, but something to where if there was at least one full shoulder lane all the way up. So in theory, in a mass evacuation, assuming everyone keeps it in their lane, you'd have 2 southbound lanes and that would leave 1 northbound lane open, we hope. Of course, unfortunately, in a evacuation, generally what happens, a bunch of people get a panic, and they're all going to jump over in the northbound lane anyways. But even if you closed it and made it southbound only for a while, if there was 3 lanes available, because a few places, and this was brought up, like at Rocky Cut, there's no shoulder. So if you did one side or the other, maybe. But I know Matt is he has had the initial discussions through email with Diane from District 6, Caltrans. And we hope to put something together fairly soon to have a dialogue about some of these things.
Jay, in regards to the finishing roads or adding capacity, that would fall under the CAPTI, the Climate Action Plan that came out a year or 2 ago. And so it would probably be, it'd be a difficult document to change, but I think it's still worth adding it to our legislative proposal for amending it or providing some adaptability due to geographic differences. I know that the new Caltrans director, Tony Taveras, he is very open to the idea of not one size fits all. He understands it, he gets it. And so that's a step in the right direction. We have an excellent working relationship with District 6, but that's what it would require. So the The other thing I wanted to ask is, just going back to one of the general principles, it says, I think it's the second to last bullet point. It says encourage and engage with local businesses, agencies, and governments to cooperate for the betterment of the community and expand voluntary regional solutions to regional problems. That's a nice, big, very open, which is a good thing. It can mean a lot of different things, but I like the part about encouraging, engaging with local businesses. Because, a lot of the things that we see coming out of Sacramento that are hurting businesses, I think they're addressed by the Cal Chamber. They've got their job killers list, and they're advocating hard on behalf of businesses. But I'm just not sure. It says encourage and engage with local businesses. I wonder how we can do that in a practical manner. As well, I guess, because we do hear from agencies, for instance, if MCTC, if there's some legislation they'd like to have us opine on, we usually hear from them, or rail, or even other governments. But how do we do that with local businesses? I'm just, again, it's there, so I'm just kind of asking the question.
Any thoughts on that?
I think traditionally, when I'm looking to engage with local businesses, where I start is with the chamber. We've got 4 chambers in Eastern Madera County, 1 in Chowchilla, 1 in Madera. Do we have one in the Ranchos? Yes. So, a number of chambers. That's a good spot. And actually was having a very good conversation at a mixer just last Thursday with a couple of our Oakhurst Chamber board members about the need for the business community to be more involved. So when we have issues like we've kind of alluded to earlier about people taking advantage of environmental policies to stop things that are happening, that there is a voice of reason, some sensibility, and that's not necessarily coming from the county, but coming from the business community. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the county and our cities within Madera County to further engage with the chambers, bring the relationship back to where it was. I think, the 90s, the 2000s, I think people talk a lot about how the chambers were much more active, involved in local, state, and federal politics. And I think there's some benefits to getting back to that. And if the county can play a small part in helping to facilitate that, I think it's worthwhile. So.
Right. I think that's a great idea, because I can think back in the 90s and even in the early 2000s when the Madera Chamber actually made an annual trip to Sacramento for Cal Chambers. We would go as a group, and Melissa was part of that in those days, and Chris Mariscotti and lots of people. But it seems like that hasn't happened in a while. And
That's a great idea. I would say maybe we need to, we cooperate. Speaking of the pit side of things, we cooperate with the chambers, but we don't really engage all of their events and everything. Like when I was sheriff, I tried to go to, except for the city, because the city was the PD. I didn't go to all the Debbie's events, but the other 4 pretty much try to go to all those events. So maybe by district, we need to more actively engage them, even if it means paying for a membership in their chamber, so that we get almost all of their emails now, but every once in a while you can either rally support for something that they don't know about, or what I've found, it was always useful, like the governor vetoed a bill this week that was it would have been a travesty if he'd signed it. So I posted it only because I thought, I wonder if people even know. I'm not staying neutral politically, but people need to know that this bill died, because a lot of people were very concerned about it. And that would be the plus side of us being more engaged with them. And then the plus side for us would be, we have something that we need businesses to really be not shaking their fist, but, knocking on the door going, hey, we need help with this. It won't be the same 10 people in this room contacting the same legislator or the same governor or governor staff member. If the whole community is calling, maybe they'll pay a little more attention.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I know that towards the end, when the Madera Chamber was going up, it was like, well, do we have a legislative platform? And there wasn't one. And I'm thinking, well, why are we even here? yeah, we're just gonna walk in and see Senator so-and-so or Assembly Member so-and-so and, oh, hi, great to see you. Oh, hope you're having a good legislative days. Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. Okay, see you, bye. I mean, nothing happened.
Right.
You know, so we really need to, anyway, it'd be nice. I think it
Sure.
would really.
Well, I mean, it's honestly, it's nice for the legislators because they hear all these bills over and over and over again. And if they've already heard from just make it up, the two city, they've heard from the city of Madera chamber and the city of Chowchilla chamber that that's a hard no, then they may be more pro to just go with hard no versus listening to the bill sponsors pitch to get them to co-sponsor, that kind of thing. So what page were you on? Whether you were reading that off of?
This was actually, it was on the general principles page. It was page 6.
Okay.
Is the second to the last
Got it.
bullet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jay, going back to Public Works really quick, wouldn't sleep tonight if we didn't include something on 1383, trash, solid waste. Particularly if the county is going to continue to own a landfill, I think we need to be cognizant that the state continues to pass more and more legislation that's making it more and more expensive for us to operate that landfill, which, obviously just translates to higher rates for, our residents. And so I think it's important for us to be engaged in that topic as well. So.
Hey, anything else? Well, that concludes what I have for the board, and I don't think there's any other agendized item unless there's staff reports or board reports. Let me check.
Okay, any more comment from the board or anyone for that matter? Any comment from the public?
So you do have a pending legislation on here. I don't have any update for you, and I haven't had a chance to look to see what, if any, bills were signed so far today.
Okay. And let's see. We don't have supervisor staff reports. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, with that, if seeing no public comment, we'll be adjourned.
Hit the gap.
Break scheduled for 3, so there'll probably be snacks back here and then the